feet. October 14, 1943. High above the scarred industrial landscape of central Germany, the sky is falling. 290. One American B-17 bombers, the vaunted flying fortresses, press onward towards a single feet. Vital objective: the ball, bearing factories of Schweinfurt. This is the industrial heart of the Third Reich. Feet. The source of the precision bearings that allow every German tank, plane, and submarine to function. Destroy it, feet, and you cripple the Nazi war machine. But the German Luftwaffe has other plans. At 20,000 feet, the air, feet, thin and freezing, erupts into a maelstrom of violence. This is a new kind of warfare, a brutal, feet, 3-dimensional combat space, and today it is a slaughterhouse. Hundreds of Messerschmitt Bf 109s and Foch, Wolf 190s, sharks in a sea of sky, feet, tear into the lumbering bomber formations. The air crackles with the angry rasp of machine guns and the deep-throated boom of cannons. Inside the bombers, feet. Boys barely out of their teens, their faces raw from frostbite and fear, fight a desperate, losing battle, feet. The promise of fighter escort, their guardian angels in P-47 Thunderbolts, has evaporated. Feet. The fighters have hit bingo fuel, the point of no return, and have been forced to turn back. Feet, leaving the bombers utterly alone, naked in the face of the wolves. The result is a massacre. Tracers, like fiery red fingers, reach out and touch a B-17, and it blossoms into a sickening orange flower of flame. A wing shears off another, sending it into a flat, silent spin. White parachutes dot the sky, feet. A fleeting sign of life in a canvas of death. But for many, there is no escape. The mission is a catastrophe, feet. 60 fortresses, each with a crew of 10 men, are swatted from the sky. 600 American airmen are killed, feet, captured or wounded in a matter of hours. The day will be seared into the memory of the 8th Air Force as Black Thursday. The Allied daylight bombing campaign, feet. The cornerstone of their strategy to win the war is on the verge of total collapse. Feet shattered by unsustainable losses. The generals are out of ideas. The experts are convinced it's impossible, 1,000 feet. But what they didn't know was that the solution wouldn't come from a committee or a laboratory, feet. It would come from the defiant mind of a single pilot, feet, a man who was about to break every rule in the book to save them all. By late 1943, the Allied war effort in the skies over Europe was facing an existential crisis. The core of their strategy, feet. The combined bomber offensive was failing, and the cost was being paid in blood. The British Royal Air Force, feet. After enduring horrific casualties in daylight raids, had already made a painful concession, feet. Switching entirely to the less accurate, but far safer, blanket bombing of cities by night. The Americans, however, feet, clung to a different doctrine, one that had become an article of faith, the concept of high altitude, precision, daylight bombing, feet. This philosophy was championed by a powerful clique of generals known as the Bomber Mafia. They believed passionately in the B-17 flying fortress. A marvel of engineering, they argued, was so heavily armed it could defend itself, feet, creating its own interlocking fields of fire and fighting its way to the target and back without escort, feet. This belief was a deadly fantasy. The reality over Germany was a grim, mathematical equation of death, feet. Without friendly fighters to protect them all the way to the target and back, feet. The bomber streams were a feast for the seasoned pilots of the Luftwaffe. German fighter leaders, feet. Men like Adolf Galland and Werner Unter Loders had developed devastatingly effective tactics, feet. They would assemble their formations out of range, organize them into disciplined waves, feet, and hurl them at the bombers from all directions, concentrating their attacks to overwhelm the gunners, feet. Their favorite tactic was the head-on pass, a terrifying, feet, high-speed charge that gave the bombers' gunners mere seconds to react before the German cannons, feet, firing explosive shells ripped through the cockpit. The American escort fighters, feet, primarily the rugged Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, were powerful aircraft, but they were hamstrung by a critical weakness range. Loaded down with external fuel tanks, 1,000 feet. They could barely reach the German border before their own fuel gauges forced them into a heartbreaking turn for home. Feet. Every bomber crewman knew the sickening feeling in the pit of his stomach when he heard the words over the radio. Little friends are turning back. It meant the deadliest part of the mission was yet to come, feet. The losses were not just staggering, they were unsustainable, feet. The 8th Air Force had calculated that a 3% loss rate was sustainable. On missions like Schweinfurt, feet, they were losing over 20%. Crews were being asked to fly missions from which, statistically, they were not expected to return. Morale was in freefall. The experts in Washington and London scrambled for answers, feet, proposing everything from adding more gun turrets to the bombers to designing entirely new long-range fighters, feet. But these were solutions that would take years to implement. The crisis was now. If the bombers were defeated, feet, the war would be prolonged indefinitely, D-Day would be impossible, feet, and the skies over Europe would belong to the Reich. Into this cauldron of crisis steps Colonel Hub Zenk. A 1936 West Point graduate, Zenk is the consummate professional soldier, feet. He is assigned command of the 56 Fighter Group and later the 479th, feet. But his influence extends across the entire 8th Air Force. Zenk is a disciplinarian, a brilliant tactician, feet. A man who believes in order and precision. His job is to fix the unfixable, to turn the tide in a losing battle, feet. He pores over mission reports, studies reconnaissance photos, and analyzes kill ratios, searching for a flaw in the enemy's armor, a weakness he can exploit. He is a man who understands the rules of war, feet. But more importantly, he is beginning to suspect the rules themselves are wrong, feet. Under his command is a man who is his polar opposite in nearly every way. Lieutenant Colonel Don Blakesley. Feet Blakesley is not a West Point man. He is a brawler from Ohio who, impatient for action, joined the Royal Canadian Air Force in 1940. He flew Spitfires in the famed Eagle squadrons, units of American volunteers flying for the British before America entered the war, feet. He has more combat hours than nearly anyone in the command. He is a natural and intuitive predator of the skies, feet. But he chafes under the rigid discipline of the military. He is known for his scruffy appearance, his disdain for polished shoes, and his love of a good argument. He trusts his gut, not the manual. The two men, feet. The professional and the prodigy clash. Their arguments in the smoky, feet, perpetually damp officers' club at Debden are legendary. Zenke, with his charts and data, feet, pushes for more disciplined formations, for tighter escort patterns. Blakesley, leaning back in his chair, feet, a glass of whiskey in hand, scoffs at the very idea. We're being defensive, he argues, his voice rising, feet. We're flying like they're goddamn bodyguards, just waiting to get hit. We're flying in straight lines, throttled back, feet. They know where we are. They know where we're going. We're playing their game. Zank listens, feet. His patience wearing thin, but he also recognizes the fire of truth in Blakesley's frustration. Then, one bleak evening, after another costly mission, Blakesley slams his glass down on the table. In a moment of pure, feet incandescent insight, he voices the idea that has been gnawing at him. We have to stop flying escort, he declares. We need to take our fighters, get out in front of the whole damn parade, feet, and go hunting for them before they ever see a bomber. Blakesley's idea is nothing short of heresy, feet. Official 8th Air Force doctrine is explicit, feet. The primary duty of the fighter is the close protection of the bombers. Feet. Straying from the bomber stream is a dereliction of duty, a court-martial offense. The fighters are to act as a shield, a protective screen, feet. Blakesley is proposing to throw away the shield and become a spear, feet. He wants to use the fighters as an offensive weapon to race ahead of the bombers by 50, even 100 miles, feet, and to ambush the German fighters as they are still forming up over their own airfields. He wants to turn the tables, feet, to make the hunters the hunted. Hub Zank, the book commander, should have dismissed it out of hand. It is reckless, unauthorized, and goes against years of established tactical doctrine, feet. But Zemk is also a pragmatist, and he knows that the current doctrine is leading them to ruin. He sees the radical, brutal genius in Blakesley's proposal. He also knows that asking for official permission from the high command, feet, from generals hundreds of miles away, is a guaranteed no. So, in an act of quiet rebellion, feet, he makes a fateful decision. We'll try it, he says. But we don't tell anyone. They begin in secret, feet. In a locked briefing room with guards posted at the door, Zank, Blakesley, feet, and a hand-picked group of the most experienced and aggressive pilots from the 4th and 56th Fighter Groups gather around a large map of Germany, feet. There is no crude prototype to build, only a revolutionary new idea to visualize. Blakesley, using a piece of chalk, feet, scrawls a new kind of diagram on the blackboard. Instead of neat, orderly lines flying alongside the bombers, he draws aggressive, sweeping arrows, arcing deep into enemy territory, feet, converging on known Luftwaffe assembly points, feet. This will be a fighter sweep. They will be a wolf pack, a term Zemk himself coins, for their first test, feet. On November 25, 1943, they mount an unauthorized mission. Under the guise of a routine patrol, Blakesley leads a small squadron of P-47s off the English coast, feet. They push their planes faster and farther than ever before, a nerve-wracking flight into the heart of the Reich, feet. They are alone, without orders, gambling their careers and their lives on a hunch. Deep inside Germany, feet. Near the city of Bremen, they find exactly what Blakesley predicted. Feet, a group of over 60 Bf-109s, climbing leisurely, arranging themselves into their attack formations, feet. Completely unaware that American fighters are anywhere near. For the Germans, it's a moment of pure shock. Feet. For Blakesley and his men, it is a turkey shoot. They dive in with a blistering attack, their 8 feet. 50 caliber machine guns per plane, ripping the German formation to shreds, feet. They claim over a dozen enemy aircraft in a matter of minutes, without a single American loss. They return to base, feet. Their fuel tanks empty, but their spirits soaring. They have proof, feet. But their unsanctioned victory is about to ignite a firestorm. A furious staff officer, A colonel who worships regulations confronts Zank, his face purple with rage. Connell. He sputters. Feet, his voice shaking. Do you have any idea what you have done? That is illegal! Feet. It is a flagrant violation of standing orders. I'll have you court-martialed for this. The confrontation takes place in the main briefing room at Debden. It is a scene of explosive tension. Feet. The bureaucratic Connell, let's call him a man defined by the rulebook, lays out his case with cold fury. Feet. He accuses Zemk of insubordination, of recklessly endangering his pilots on an unauthorized joyride. Feet. And worst of all, of abandoning his primary duty, protecting the bombers. He represents the old way of thinking. Feet. The rigid adherence to a doctrine that is actively failing. Zank, cool and unflappable on the surface. Feet stands his ground. He doesn't make excuses. He presents the facts, the mission data, the gun camera footage. Feet, the confirmed kills and the lack of American losses. Your way is getting our boys killed. Connell. Zank states flatly, my way gets them home. At that, the room erupts. The pilots who flew the mission, still buzzing with adrenaline, crowd around. He's right, sir, one shouts. They never knew what hit them, another adds. For the first time, we were on the offensive. Blakesley, Feet, never one to shy away from a fight, steps forward. With all due respect, Connell. He says, Feet, his voice dripping with contempt. Feet. The only thing we're endangering is the Luftwaffe's kill record. The argument escalates. Feet. A shouting match between the defenders of the status quo and the pioneers of a new reality. The careers of Zemk and his men are hanging by a thread. Sallows and Feet. Just as the bureaucrat is threatening to place Zank under arrest, the door to the briefing room swings open. The shouting stops instantly. Every man in the room snaps to attention. Feet. Standing in the doorway is Lieutenant General James, Jimmy Doolittle, the new commander of the 8th Air Force. Feet. Doolittle is more than a general, he is a living legend, the man who led the audacious bombing raid on Tokyo in 1942. Feet. He is an aviator's aviator, a man who understands risk and innovation better than anyone. He silences the room with a single look. What in the hell is going on here? He asks, his voice deceptively calm. Feet. He listens patiently to the furious accusations from the staff colonel. Then he turns to Zemke and Blakesley. Tell me your side. They lay out their theory, the results of their secret mission, Feet, and their vision for a new kind of air war. Doolittle, the ultimate maverick. Feet looks at the grim bomber lost charts pinned to the wall. He looks at the rigid, outdated tactical diagrams. Then he looks at the eager, determined faces of the fighter pilots. A slow smile spreads across his face. Feet. He turns to the sputtering staff officer and says, "You're relieved of this discussion." Then he looks at Zemke. Feet. My orders were to stop the bombers from being shot down. Your method seems to work. The rulebook is out the window. Feet, from now on, you have one mission: go out and destroy the German fighter force. Let the wolves hunt. Feet. That single decision, made in a crowded English briefing room, would change the course of the air war. Feet. It was the moment the 8th Air Force was finally unshackled. Feet. If you find stories of leadership and innovation as compelling as we do, be sure to subscribe to Last Words and hit the notification bell. Feet. You won't want to miss our next investigation into the pivotal moments where one decision changed everything. Now, back to the hunt. Doolittle's command was a green light for a revolution. Feat. Hub Zank and Don Blakesley now had the blessing of the one man who mattered. And they had a new weapon to make their vision a reality, the North American P-51 Mustang. With its Rolls-Royce Merlin engine and incredible range, the Mustang was the warplane the Allies had been dreaming of. It was fast, agile, and it could fly all the way to Berlin and back. It was the perfect tool for the Wolfpack. The change was immediate and electrifying. Fighter groups across England began painting over the defensive escort diagrams and training in the new, aggressive Zemke's Wolfpack tactics. The testing data was written in fire and steel across the skies of Germany. On mission after mission, the results were staggering. On March 6, 1944, the 8th Air Force launched its first full-scale daylight raid on Berlin itself. For the bomber crews, it was a terrifying prospect, a flight into the very heart of the beast. But this time, they were not alone. Blakesley, leading the 4th Fighter Group, took his Mustangs out ahead. They were the hunters. The German controllers, seeing the American fighters on their radar so early, were thrown into confusion. They scrambled their forces to intercept what they assumed was a fighter-only raid. Instead, they flew headlong into a buzzsaw. The P-51s tore the unprepared German formations to pieces. The kill ratios, once tragically skewed in the Luftwaffe's favor, flipped dramatically. On that first Berlin raid, the 8th Air Force lost 69 bombers, a terrible price, but far lower than it would have been. In exchange, the American fighters, primarily the Mustangs, claimed 97 German fighters destroyed. The German pilots were stunned. Their own post-war accounts are filled with a sense of shock and disbelief. Famed ace June Enther-Roll would later state, when the P-51 came, the party was over. Another pilot wrote in his diary, "We cannot believe it, We fly up to attack the fat cats, and suddenly we are fighting for our lives against Mustangs over our own homes, Where did they come from?" The psychological impact was as devastating as the physical losses. The German fighter force was now forced onto the defensive, forced to react to the American moves. They could no longer dictate the terms of the engagement. The numbers told the undeniable story. In the fall of 1943, it was not uncommon for an unescorted bomber group to suffer 25% losses on a single mission. By the spring of 1944, with the Mustang sweeping ahead, the average loss rate dropped to below 3%. Tens of thousands of lives were saved. One bomber gunner, after returning from a brutal mission over Leipzig, where Blakesley's group had fought a swirling 2-hour battle to protect them, found the ace on the flight line. With tears in his eyes, he grabbed Blakesley's hand and said simply, "Because of you, we came home. Because of you, we get to fly again." That was the only medal that ever mattered, The story of Zemke's Wolfpack is a powerful testament to how breaking the rules can sometimes be the only way to win. It took courage, not just in the air, but in the briefing room. To learn more about other mavericks of military history, consider downloading our sponsor's audiobook service, You can find thousands of titles on military history, strategy, and leadership. Use code LAST2ARDS for a free 30-day trial. Now, The Legacy of the Men Who Tamed the Wolf. By June 6, 1944, D-Day, the Luftwaffe was a broken force. The relentless offensive pressure of the fighters' sweeps had decimated its ranks. destroyed its aircraft on the ground, and shattered the morale of its pilots. Feat. The Allies achieved total air supremacy over the beaches of Normandy. Feat, a condition that was absolutely essential for the success of the invasion. General Dwight D. Housen feat. Eisenhower himself would later state that, without the victory won by the fighters in the months leading up to the invasion, feat, the entire operation would have been in jeopardy. The 4th Fighter Group, the pioneers of the new tactic, would end the war with 116 enemy aircraft destroyed, a record for the 8th Air Force. After the war, feat. High-ranking German officials were interrogated. When asked what the most decisive factor in their defeat was, feat, Albert Speer, the Minister of Armaments, gave a simple answer. The American long-range fighter. General Adolf Galland, commander of Germany's fighter forces, feat, was even more specific, he said. The day I saw Mustangs over Berlin, I knew the jig was up. The P-51 Mustang would go down in history as one of the greatest aircraft ever built, feat, with over 15,000 produced. But it was a machine that required a new philosophy to unlock its potential, feat, a philosophy born of frustration and defiance. That philosophy is the enduring legacy of this story. The principles of the fighter sweep and offensive counter, air, the idea of seizing the initiative and destroying an enemy's air force before it can become a threat, feat, remains a central pillar of modern air combat doctrine for every major air force in the world today, feat. When you see a modern stealth fighter like the F-22 Raptor, feat, designed to penetrate deep into enemy airspace and establish dominance, feat, you are seeing the direct descendant of the tactics scribbled on a blackboard by Don Blakesley. As for the humble heroes, Hubzink continued a distinguished career in the U.S. Air Force, feat, forever remembered as the brilliant architect of the victory, and Don Blakesley, the untamable maverick, feat. He ended the war with more combat flight hours than almost any other American fighter pilot. He was offered parades, book deals, and a path to high command. He turned them all down. He refused the fame, feat, returning to a quiet civilian life, content with the knowledge that he had fought the war on his own terms, feat. His story serves as a powerful moral lesson that in times of crisis, feat, progress is not made by committees or by following the rules. It is forged in the fire of dissent by the stubborn, feat. Brilliant and disobedient few who have the courage to declare that the experts are wrong, feat, and the audacity to prove it.